Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast. This is episode 9, and we'll call it the Memorial Day special because we will talk about Memorial Day. Now, Memorial Day in the United States in 2023 is May 29th, and Memorial Day is a day set aside for everyone in America to remember those who died in battle, who gave up their lives so that we could preserve the way of life in this country, or at least that's what a lot of people will say. So in a sense, if we do it right, if we remember those who died in battle correctly, I believe, personally, subjectively speaking, it's a pretty much anti-war day. Because how can you think about all of the lives that were lost in these wars and think that war is good? War takes from people. And so Memorial Day is an anti-war day, I believe. And this is not very difficult to see because war sucks. War is about the most destructive activity, human activity. There is nothing worse. Sun Tzu will back me up on this in his very brief work, The Art of War. He explains that war is extremely expensive, and so therefore great pains must be taken to avoid war, right? So you got to be able to see the signs, you have to be able to understand what's going on around you and make the appropriate preparations so that no one will even think about attacking you. And so the height of wisdom, the height of intelligence is to prepare in such a way that not even the people who you are charged with protecting even knew that there was danger very, very close. In other words, you rule the country, you lead the country and the military in such a way that no one even realizes that danger was very close. That is your goal, to preserve peace so that we don't have to worry about aggression outside or inside the country. And on the opposite side of things, we have Thucydides, the funeral oration in Thucydides. Now, Thucydides wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War, which is the war between Sparta and Athens, which took place after the Persians tried to invade the Greek peninsula, and that's where the movie 300 was based on, right? Persia trying to invade the Greek peninsula. Well, they were able to fight off the Persians, but then they started warring amongst themselves not long after that. And so this longer work was excerpted, right? Certain things were taken out of the history of the Peloponnesian War and put into a shorter work called On Justice, Power, and Human Nature. And in this more abridged version of that work, you have a lot of the speeches that were given prior to the war, during the war, and a little bit of commentary from Thucydides himself. And you might be surprised that a lot of the things contained in these speeches sound a lot like what we can hear today in the United States. So even though On Justice, Power, and Human Nature was written 2,500 years ago, 2,500, in a different place, in a different language, with different culture, different technology, the speeches read very much as they do today. In other words, in chapter 2, you'll see people trying to get the population excited for war, to give them the reasons for war, why they shouldn't stay out of the war, but engage in war. And then you hear the pro-peace arguments, and it's very, very similar to what you could hear in the United States today. Well, the war starts, and then winter comes, and when winter arrives, war takes a break, right? Because you can't fight in winter in those days. Even today, in Eastern Europe, it's very difficult to fight during the winter, just simply because of all the mud. And so everyone takes a break. But when the fighting takes a break, that's when all of the bodies of the dead soldiers come back. And so Pericles is seeing all of these dead soldiers coming back to Athens. And it's shocking. It's shocking to all these people in Athens because they thought that the war was going to be a cakewalk. It was just going to be very easy. They were going to be victorious very quickly. The Spartans will just get tired of fighting and the war will come to an end. But it doesn't happen that way. There are a lot of dead soldiers. And so a lot of people are upset. You know, they were like, wow, I didn't think it was going to be like this. You know, I thought people were going to die, but I didn't think it was going to be my son or my husband or my father. And so a lot of people are upset. And so Pericles, who's a leader in the Athenian government at the time, like he's the go-to person, he gives a speech at the funeral. And so it's a huge public funded funeral, lots of pomp and circumstance. Everyone is just hanging on every word that he's giving in the speech. I was going to read lines and selections from the speech, but it turns out it's a little bit too long. But if you read it, and that's can be found in chapter 3 of Thucydides, you'll see that he's trying to comfort everyone by talking about how great Athens is, right? They shouldn't be too sad because they died fighting for Athens, and Athens is the best. And so losing your life defending Athens, well, you can't do worse than that, right? You can't do better than that either, right? There's nothing better than losing your life fighting for Athens. In fact, all of their enemies are jealous that they couldn't die for Athens, right? They had to die for Sparta. So it's this kind of speech. Athens is so awesome. People hate us because they ain't us kind of material and content. And then he talks about all of the war dead, how they're heroes. No matter what they did in life before the war, because they died in battle, they're a hero. And a lot of people who are caught up in the emotion might be like, yeah, that's so true. But then you got to realize that it means that if you are a criminal, if you were a really horrible criminal, immoral, psychopath, but you died in the war, hey, you're a hero now, which is kind of odd. But hey, we can't dwell on the details, right? We got to just focus on the generalization to keep that emotional high going. We don't want anyone to get offended that, oh, wait, you mean, my relative was a hard criminal, but he's not a hero? Oh, he's a hero too? Okay, well, okay, proceed with your speech, right? And so everyone's a hero. Everyone died in this war, and it was a sacrifice, right? It was not a vain death, but a death which meant something, which is kind of interesting because if you go back to the reason why the war even started, it's because of expansionism. It's because people wanted more power and more wealth. And they needed Athens out of the way, and Athens then was insulted and offended. So they said, okay, you want to fight us? Then let's have a fight. And then all of the territories, all of the different city-states started rebelling against each other, trying to pick sides, who they thought were going to win. And then at the end of the speech, Pericles then tries to recruit more soldiers. So on the one hand, he's trying to comfort everyone, but on the other hand, he's trying to get more soldiers for more fighting and for more dying. And so you see that kind of thing going on in Thucydides. And it's really interesting only because it sounds so much like today. It's even shocking to a lot of people. So if you have a chance, you should probably take a look at that. But one might argue that the United States is worse off. We know that in the United States, wars are generally started with lies, right? I mean, seriously, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, people who tried to make everyone aware that it was a lie that Hussein did not have any weapons of mass destruction. They were fired. They were let go. They were kicked out of all of those inner war planning circles because they wanted the war. This is not anything new. It's not surprising. There was a person in England, author Ponsonby. He wrote a short work called The Falsehood in Wartime. And he wrote this after World War One. And a lot of people will credit him for saying something like, when war is declared, truth is the first casualty. And he wrote the 10 Commandments of War Propaganda. And I'll go through it really quickly. You can Google it if you want. The first one, we don't want war. Right? No one wants war, but hey, we got to. Second, the opposite party alone is guilty of war, right? They're the bad people. And so they started, we gotta fight them. Third, the enemy is the face of the devil, right? The axis of evil. We come up with all of these names for our enemy. Even Putin these days is the devil incarnate, right? We defend a noble cause, not our own interest, right? And so what we're doing is we're fighting for righteousness. The enemy systematically commits cruelties. Our mishaps are involuntary. Next, the enemy uses forbidden weapons, and which means we don't, or if we do, it's because they use them first. We suffer small losses, but those of the enemy are enormous. Next, artists and intellectuals back our cause. And the reason is because, especially we saw this in the 60s, artists and intellectuals usually oppose war. They're usually pro-peace. So if they're backing you, then, hey, you must be right. Next, our cause is sacred, right? We're actually doing God's work even, trying to save all these people from all these evil people. And finally, all who doubt our propaganda are traitors. And we see this a lot, right? So if you suggest that you would rather see less killing and dying, you're a Putin lover, right? I don't know, man. But, in my mind, I see a lot of people dying. And I would rather, and just because of the way my brain works, I imagine my own children dying as a result of this war, which I had no part in starting, right? Like, I just wanted to do my thing, go to work, raise my family, but nope, someone's got to set off a chain of events, which then leads to this mess. Just so you know, I usually go into it a little bit more if I have more time, but it's interesting. The United States basically goes through these 10 commandments of propaganda every single time, and a lot of people in America go along with it. It's just crazy. I say frequently these days that the United States is like the battered spouse in an abusive relationship, right? Oh, this time is different. Oh, I promise things will be better. But then, they're off to the hospital again. And so that's the American people, constantly lied to, always fall for it. Even most recently, there was something called the Durham report. And it was an investigation launched into the relationship, or, what was really going on behind the whole Trump-Russia collusion sort of scandal, I guess, for lack of a better term. And a lot of people say, oh, it's a nothing burger because there were no arrests as a result of it, And if you've ever heard of Judge Napolitano, who does a podcast called the Judging Freedom, the former Supreme Court Justice of New Jersey, he explained that the reason why there were no arrests was because the statute of limitations had expired. So even if anyone wanted to, because it's been so long ago, you can't arrest anyone, no matter how bad the crime was. And there were a lot of interesting things stated in the Durham report. I'm in the process of reading it, but it's full of legal it's written in a legal style, and so I'm not used to reading that, and so it's taken me a while, but I will get through it. But some of the more interesting things is it sort of throws cold water on this whole Trump and Russian collusion. But if that is not rock solid, then why is there all this anti-Russian sentiment, so much so that we're literally pushing World War III right now? It's a proxy war that's happening in the Ukraine. It's no secret that a lot of people in the US government is using Ukraine and the Ukrainians to weaken Russia somehow. Uh, why and how that makes sense? Like if I was a Ukrainian and my children had to die because the United States wanted to weaken Russia, yeah, no, I'm not having it, right? I want peace yesterday, but there it is. And plus we see all these other problems like money laundering. You know, Ukraine used to be listed as one of the most corrupt countries in Eastern Europe. Um, and I remember seeing one list like that where it was far more corrupt than Russia was. But now all of a sudden, you know, Ukraine is the epitome of freedom, which is kind of interesting to me. So seeing this manipulation of perspective contributes to this pro-war attitude that we see all over the United States. Another thing that we come to know because of the Durham report is that the deep state is real. If you have, and all of the deep state means, broadly speaking, are the unelected people who work for the government, right? Like the FBI, the CIA. If they don't like what's happening in society, then they take steps. They do things because they have the budget to do so and they have the means to do so. And so what's really interesting is that if you want to talk about some sort of anti-stability activity, one might not look at Trump, but one might want to look at the FBI and the CIA a little bit more closely. But don't take my word for it. You can download the Durham report. It's widely available, and you can read it yourself. Now, I will have to say, this is a special episode, so it's going a little bit long, but I do want to say that I love the United States. In spite of the fact that I was frequently, the victim of violence here in this country, I love this country, and I joke around with, I used to tell people in my class, because people would always look at me and say, oh, you're just anti-America. No, if you cut me, I will bleed red, white, and blue. And I'm not kidding. I am so moved when I hear the national anthem. I have to hide my tears. I am literally moved by that song. Maybe it's socialization. Maybe it's certain social conditioning like Pavlov's dogs or something like that. But hey, I really do love what this country was supposed to be. But what are we doing now to our people, right? What's going on in this country? Are we setting them up to have to die in a war? I just don't, I can't abide by that. And I've even had some students who went into the military. So the school where I teach, there are a lot of former military, people who have rotated out. I once had a class where I had every branch of the military represented, including the Coast Guard, represented in the same section. It was pretty awesome. We had some pretty good conversations. I've even befriended a lot of former military. I even visited someone at his house in Virginia, and we went shooting and everything. It was pretty awesome. But I don't like what is expected and what the military is being asked to do. War is a Racket is a short book written by Smedley Butler, who is a Marine and received the Medal of Honor twice. And he basically saw that certain businesses profit from war. And so how good is war? I mean, do we believe all of the propaganda? that is said to get people excited about a war. And so he wrote something called a pamphlet called War is a Racket. And if you've been following the news, you know that there are people in Congress who are suggesting that we invade Mexico because of the drug problem there. And you may have also heard that 700 soldiers were sent to Peru. And if you do a little Googling, might be a little bit surprised why they're going there. But the democratically elected government was ousted. And so the US soldiers are going there to support the illegitimate government of Peru. Isn't that interesting, huh? So if we're going to ask people to put their lives in the line, I wish that it would be for something real, for something that had value, something that really meant something. And chances are, unless we were attacked first, we're not going to get that. Inserting ourselves into someone else's conflict without really knowing any of the history, without taking into consideration all of the different subjectivities, I think is just extremely problematic. You'll never have a good outcome as a result. The United States these days engages in preemptive war, nation building, regime change, and all of these activities, they all fail. Just like Afghanistan, we were winning for 20 years in Afghanistan, and all of a sudden, hey, we lost. With this kind of attitude in this country, there is no peace. There can be no peace. And so this Memorial Day, I hope that we remember the sacrifices that have been made to build this country, but also to take into consideration the people who sent them there to die. Was there a choice? Was there opportunity? Was there a way to avoid the conflict, to have a better outcome? Maybe. We'll never know. History is sort of like water under the bridge. But moving forward, I hope that this is a perspective worth considering to inspire us and to have us inspire our leaders, or to even vote for leaders who would seek peace rather than war. Remember, in case you forgot, 20 minutes later, war is the worst possible choice that anyone and any nation can take. And so I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail. More people would realize and acknowledge the subjectivity of everything and look for ways to bring about peace, promote peace, and preserve peace, because life is better in peace. I'll see you in the next episode.